So the question we're going to debate this week is the Camino hard? It's a very common question. Lots of people asking online, how hard is the Camino? That's what we're going to talk about coming right up. So it's a pretty tough question, to be honest. Is the Camino hard? In what sense? Um, what's your start point in terms of age, physical fitness? So I'm going to share some thoughts, and it may not, if you haven't walked a Camino before, it may get you thinking about the difficulty in a slightly different way. So first of all, I mean, there was a very interesting debate online in the last few days about how hard some sections of the Camino Frances are, for example. And there's a section coming down into Zubiri in the first few days prior to Pamplona, which is rather infamous. And it has a lot of exposed rock. People refer to it as the dragon's back or the dragon's teeth, and it has this sort of mystique about it, and people worry about it. And that got me thinking, about how hard is the Camino really? And we can psych ourselves up a little bit unnecessarily. So just talking about that particular section, the first time I walked the Frances in 2015, long story, I was walking injured. I was injured before I even got there. I was just stubborn and wanted to do it. And I was worried about this descent into Zubiri, and everybody's saying how hard it was. And so I took the road alternative down to Zubiri, which I didn't find that great either. I didn't like having to jump the safety barriers on hairpin bends when cars were coming up and things like that. And then in 2018, when I walked that section again with Pat, I thought, stuff it, I'm not taking Pat down the road, but she'll freak out on these hairpin bends with cars swinging around the corners. And we just went for it. And we went straight on down to Zubiri and, across the Dragon's Teeth. And it was kind of, what was all the worry about? It was tricky. And what I want to really talk about this week is kind of what do we mean by hard when we're talking about the Camino? So there are sections. So on the Camino Frances, for example, so let's get rid of that pop-up. There are sections on the Camino Frances which are tricky and you have to take care. They're not particularly difficult. Some people have fallen and had accidents, and you could get hit by a car. So you have to take care on some of these bits, and so on the Camino Frances, that last bit into Zubiri, use poles, take your time, watch your footing. If you don't do those things and you trip, you have a nasty accident because the terrain is quite tricky. Likewise, coming down after Alto del Perdón, past Pamplona, there's some, round sort of river rocks for a couple of 100 meters and things which you need to take care on. There's the last section down into Porto-Marín, which you need to take care on. Probably the hardest bit on the Camino Frances, in my mind, is coming down from the Cruz de Ferro and down towards El Acebo, and then from there down to Molina Seca. It's quite steep. There's little gravelly sections. There's exposed rock. If it's wet, it can be very slippery. Take care. Go slow. Use poles. Having said that, I slipped last time I went down there straight on my butt. But is it hard? So let's just park that sort of physical difficulty for a minute. There are sections of all Caminos where you need to take care as you're walking them. Ensure you don't lose your balance, don't lose your footing, that you have the right footwear, all that sort of stuff. And I suppose as part of that also, it helps if you've done a little bit of training. Now, I've said this many times on the channel, I'm not really into training. I'm into losing a bit of weight, doing a bit of walking, but there is no doubt that if you do a bit of training and build up strength in your legs and so on, it's going to make the whole thing easier and safer for you. Okay, so let's put that aside. What is the hard bit about a Camino? And there are a number of hard bits. There's the physical bit, the draining sort of walking day after day after day, which can sort of wear down the body. But I think what is much harder is the mental and emotional challenge. So when people say to me, is the Camino hard? Physically, and I don't want this to sound like it's a walk in the park, it's not. But if you take care, don't try and walk too fast, don't try and walk too far each day, I would say it's not actually that difficult physically. People who find it physically difficult are pushing themselves too hard, maybe are very unfit. I'm not fit, but I do a little bit of training. And I walk within my limitations. So Pat and I only walk about 20 k's a day. That's enough for us. If we walk more, we know we're going to hurt ourselves and cause injury. So I'm not sure that it's that hard physically. And then you might say, but walking 800 k's on the Camino Francis, that's got to be hard physically. Here's a funny thing. I've walked Caminos of different lengths. Probably the shortest was 200 k's. I've walked from Saint Jean a couple of times, 800 k's. My last one, if you've been watching the channel, was about 1200 k's from Sevilla up to Astorga, across the Invierno, then out to Finisterre and Murcia. That was about 1200. Which of those do you think was probably the easiest physically? I'll tell you, the 1200 k's. It was a walk in the park compared to the others. Now, why is that? I should have posed myself that question before asking it. Why was walking 1200 k's easier than the others? I think because I had a comfortable routine. I was used to being on Camino. I wasn't pushing myself. I was walking comfortable distances, well within my capability every day. I had my gear sorted out. I knew how to take care of my feet. Things like stretching, hydration, so important, hydration. And there's videos about that on the channel. Absolutely vital to make sure you keep yourself hydrated. Not only is dehydration dangerous, and on routes like the Via de la Plata, people have died because of dehydration and exhaustion. But as you get dehydrated, your muscles start hurting. You're going to get tendon problems. So hydration is really important. Keeping up your electrolytes, stretching. I do it without thinking now. Before starting in the morning, I'm stretching. I don't spend 10 minutes doing it. It might be 2 minutes. A few calf stretches, Achilles stretches, back stretches, just warming up the body. Every time I stop, I'll stretch a bit, get going again, stretch a bit. I'm probably coming up to a hill. I'll do some Achilles stretches. I probably stretch 20 times a day, at least. Just might be 30 seconds. But doing that and hydration and all that sort of stuff just keeps the body going. So I think if we're careful, the physical side of the Camino doesn't have to be that hard. What is hard, if you haven't done it before, is the day in, day out walking. And you might walk 10, 20 Ks practicing at home, but do that every day for a week. And your muscles are getting sore, but you actually then start to break through all that soreness and stiffness, and it becomes quite comfortable and natural, and you just keep doing it. So I suppose to put that into context, taking all that into account, having the right footwear and stretching and hydrating and electrolytes and making sure you're eating the right things and making sure you're not too unfit when you turn up. I walked for 60 days on my last Camino. Could I have kept going? Yeah, I'd probably do another 60. I didn't want to. I think I had a Forrest Gump moment just on my very last day coming into Murcia, and I stopped at the top of the final descent and thought, I think I'll go home now. Yeah, I kind of loved the experience, but I was ready to go home. But the point I'm making is I don't think distance makes it hard. It doesn't matter whether you're walking 100 Ks or 1,000 Ks. I think if you're prepared, that's not the hard bit. The hard bit is between your ears. For me, that's the hardest bit. And I've talked about this a few times on the channel, and it's when things are getting uncomfortable, when things are not going quite as you expected. Maybe you picked up a couple of niggling injuries, maybe there's stuff happening at home that's got you worried. All this stuff that plays in your head when you're walking 7, 8 hours a day and just thinking, that's the hard bit. And that was the hardest bit on my first Camino. And I wanted to go home a couple of times. I felt guilty about being there. There was stuff happening at home that I felt I should be helping with. Family was encouraging me to stay and finish. It's a story for another day. I've mentioned it on other videos, but I struggled with it. And a couple of times on that first Camino for 2 or 3 days, I was low, really, really low, and wanting to go home. And then I can remember the second time it happened. I just passed the Cruz de Ferro. I was sitting on the hillside there, looking out towards Pomperada. Down below me was El Efebo. You ain't got far to go now, mate. Get on with it. What are you moping about for? It's particularly walking on your own. You sometimes play these mind games. And having walked with someone a couple of times, walked with Pat, it's probably not any easier, to be honest, because we're both bouncing mind games off each other. So I think, to come back to the original question, is the Camino hard? It probably depends what your expectation is. Physically, it doesn't have to be, if you're realistic about your capabilities and so on. Emotionally, it can be. And if you have unrealistic expectations for your Camino, that could be challenging. If you're expecting it to be transformational and it's not, or you're expecting to lose 10 kilos and you don't, I think that's probably one of the key things, that you don't go into it with too many expectations and just chill, let go, see what happens. But is it hard? No, I don't think so. I love it. I wish I was there now. I'm looking at flights for our next one. So yeah, look, to summarize, if you want to, I guess, get through the physical aspect of it, do some training before. Don't go nuts. Don't, damage yourself in training. I did that on my first one. Be realistic about your walking distances. Have some flexibility with that. If you're finding that you're pushing yourself too hard, cut back the distances. Don't try and keep up with other people. That's the worst thing. Maybe your comfortable distance is 20 Ks, but you've met these great people and they're all walking 30. Do not try to keep up with them and walk 30, because you will get injured. You've got to walk at your own speed and your own sort of comfortable distances. Look after your body, your feet. Check out the video on here about blisters and stuff. I'll put a link up there, wherever it goes. There, I think. I've got to think in reverse. Hydration, really important. Eat the right stuff. I mean, I did a lot of research about nutrition before my last one, because it was quite a remote Camino and I wanted to make sure I had good energy levels and things like that. So I think I've done one on nutrition. If I haven't, I'll do one. Make sure that you get rest. Don't just be pushing yourself all day. Make sure you rest, put your feet up, relax a bit. Don't go too fast. Yeah. And there we go. It doesn't have to be hard. And if you come to those tricky bits, like down into Zubiri and down from Alto del Perdón, be prepared for it. It's going to be tricky. So go slow. Allow yourself plenty of time. Maybe have poles. Just be prepared that that 200-meter section might take you 30 minutes to get down, because you're going to shuffle down the side where it's a little bit less slippery or whatever. Just take care and you'll be fine. So there we go. Am I talking rubbish again? Love to hear your comments down below. Were you surprised at how hard the Camino was, and what aspect of it was difficult for you? The physical bit, the emotional bit, or were you actually surprised how not? I'm not going to call it easy. It's not easy walking hundreds of kilometers, but was it not as hard as you expected? and maybe why. So let's cut there. Stop the waffle, Rob. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Bye for now.